Psychologist Dr. Rob Pennington has been a self-employed business owner since 1980. He's a 4-time recipient of the Mental Health Association's Outstanding Speaker Award and the highest rated trainer by ExxonMobil employees each year for 29 years. He is author of the award-winning autobiographical self-help book, Find the Upside of the Downtimes, How to Turn Your Worst Experiences into Your Best Opportunities. But being successfully self-employed for over 3 decades, Rob has still struggled with the stresses of maintaining his health, his business, and his relationships. He once lost more than half his contracted business in a single phone call. His wife often threatened to divorce him. One of his major corporate training contacts outsourced all of his programs to herself. It took him years to learn to schedule time for himself. An employee once created separate contracts with Rob's customers and hid it. And if all that wasn't enough, Rob's home life became an overwhelming challenge as his wife's multiple sclerosis required increasingly daily care. Until she passed away, Rob was her primary caregiver every evening and weekend for close to 10 years. In addition to all that, he was shot in the center of his chest, a few blocks from his home by an unknown assailant with a .38 caliber pistol. And he has survived a number of IRS audits.
Look at that, shooting nothing, audit. Oh no!
This man knows about stress. Fortunately for us here this morning, he has also learned valuable insights that he will be sharing in his presentation. Being self-employed, permanently unemployed, is permanently stressful. Insights on maintaining health, business, and relationships as a business owner. Let's give a big WBEA welcome to Dr. Rob Pennington.
Thank you very much. Now let me get back to where I need to be. My purpose today is not to transform the quality of the rest of your life, it's to actually save your life. The Center for Disease Control says 65% of you are going to die from a preventable illness, an illness that's related to stress. The American Psychological Association says that every month, 77% of you have physical symptoms and 73% have psychological symptoms, all related to stress. And this may seem counterintuitive, but women who say they have position of power or control are 70% more likely to die as a result of stress than women who do not feel in control. So anyone here not feeling in control? Because that would probably be better. But how many feel like you have to be in control? In looking at the survey results of the past stress, a lot of people are experiencing stress. Looking forward to the challenges, there's a lot. The major ones, these are what's in the survey, all the different stresses and challenges, and see which one's your favorite ones. Moving through each one of those, we identify the 3 that I think were most important. One was more competition within the industry, and then changes in the economy, and both of those lead to increase in financial pressures. Does that make sense? I mean, we all know what our expenses are, we don't know where our income's coming from. That's the challenge. That's why it's permanently stressful, always facing the unknown. So let me give you a certain definition of stress. And don't worry about remembering any of this, I'll make sure you have all the materials. First definition is stress is resistance to change. I mean, every time a change happened, if it took you in a direction you wanted to go, where would there be any stress? But there's just lots of challenges in life. There's lots of unknowns, and all of us have a tendency to project a negative into it. How many of you have heard the phrase, the fear of the unknown? And we all did that. How many of you heard the phrase, the joy of the unknown? Kind of a strange concept. But isn't it true that every joy you've ever experienced before you did, it was unknown? And is the unknown by definition positive or negative? It's unknown. But we project the negative, and that's a habit. You're not ever going to stop that. One of the things I'd like you to get out of this is that stress is just going to be part of the job. That's why I say it's permanently stressful. life's permanently stressful. You're not going to learn anything that's going to eliminate stress in your life. That's just not the way it is. You can't control your initial reaction to anything. If I knew you well enough, I could say one word with a tone in my voice and a look in my eye, and I could push an emotional wave through you of hurt, of anger, of worry. Your family knows how to do this. And when they don't like how they're feeling and think you're the reason, they know how to punch your buttons. But they're our buttons. So even though we can't control our initial reaction, we can learn how to control our second reaction. We can learn how to move through it faster. You have to recognize when you're having it in the first place. So there's something I call the automatic stress reaction that I think happens anytime anything or anyone isn't the way we want it to be. We go through this process every time we're resisting that change of holding our breath, tensing our muscles, having self-doubt, thinking negative, and getting serious. Have you noticed yourself doing that? And aren't we pretty good at it? I mean, we don't decide to do this. It just happens. All throughout the day, when we're forced to stop and wait, most of us are kind of in a hurry. We've got things to do, people to meet. And these things slow us down and we have a resistance to it. So like when you are at the stoplight and you're late already, how much does your upset influence how long the light is red? Not at all. But how long does it influence how long it feels like it's red? So here's all you need to know about stress management. Choose to do what you're doing while you're doing it. So if you're at the stoplight, choose to be at the stoplight. If you've got an overwhelming challenge of finding new business, choose to have that challenge. The more we resist those changes, the more stress and frustration and worry and fear we'll experience that keeps us from moving in a more constructive direction to actually address it. And we have habits that do that, and it's killing us. And I want to help you learn something that's different than I think you'll learn in anything about stress. Most things about stress are about exercise and diet. How many of you already know it would be good for you to exercise more? How many of you have known this for a long time? How many of you know it would be good for you to eat less? How many of you have known this for a long time? How many of you would just feel more stress and guilt of a program focused on exercising more and dieting? So that didn't work for me. I assume it's not working for you. What I want to help you learn how to do is recognize it faster and move through it quicker. I'll give you tools and techniques for doing that in yourself, because no organization is healthier than the person at the top. And how you are permeates the organization. But then I'm also going to teach you before you leave here at 1:30 how to remove the majority of conflict in your life. Because it's not about time and money that we think is the source of stress. It's really the pain we have in our relationships at work and at home that eat at us. So I want to help you learn how to do both of those. But I don't want to just talk about it. I want us to have some experience of this. So what I'd like you to do, Stephen, would you kind of help me with this? Sure. This is Stephen Haslam. This is my business partner of 30 years. Thank you. He's put up with me for 30 years. And we'll be sharing some about the challenges that we had and what we discovered that helped us be more successful individually and together. But this is an activity that Stephen's come up with that I think is very powerful, and I'd like to help you have an experience.
One of the most common causes of stress for most managers is the challenge of balancing your authority with the need to get people to contribute and collaborate, while at the same time you're influencing them to move in the direction you want them to move.
Does that sound familiar?
Now, one of the things that Rob's going to be sharing a little bit later this morning is based on principles of the martial arts, which is basically about how to influence others to move in the direction that you want them to move, how to reduce their resistance before you try to get your point of view across. Do any of you have martial art training? Anybody here? Ooh, well, I'll be interested. Okay, but yeah, everybody knows something, from what you see in the movies. I want to see how you can apply what you know about that to influence somebody to reduce their resistance to your point of view. To do this, everybody needs to have a partner. So Rob's going to help you pair you up.
You two. Can you two be partners here? And then you two. Tommy, can you be Matt's partner? Yeah. And you do it back there with Matt because he's got a responsibility, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, as we give the instructions, if you find that you recognize this and you've done it before, that's okay. Just don't tell your partner that you've done it before.
That's important.
Yeah. So, what I want you to do first is choose which one of you is going to be partner A and which one's going to be partner B. Go ahead and get that worked out first. Doesn't matter who's who.
Let me do this one.
I know.
Okay, now that was the first conflict potential. Notice how you handled it. Some of you handled avoiding the conflict by going, I'll be A. Some of you are a little more polite. You went, you'll be A. Some of you avoided it completely, go, I don't care, whatever you want to be. So if you got two people going, I don't care, like, what are we going to eat tonight? I don't care, then sometimes it's hard. That can become a conflict. So let's just make sure a decision was made. All the A's, raise your hand. Okay,
Great.
good.
Okay. Now what I want you to do is stand up, stand facing your partner, get some room to move.
Your mic went off.
No tables or chairs in between you.
It went off.
Is it off? Okay. We find that actually when we do this out in the field, like with the oil workers, everybody's got a knife in their pocket. We have to tell them, take the knife out of your pocket. None of that. Now listen carefully. I'm going to give you the instructions. Don't begin until I say go. First, partner A, your job is to make a fist as tightly as you can. You make a fist as tightly as you can. Partner B, your job is to get their fist opened in any way that you can. Don't start yet. Let's make sure we're clear. A, you make a fist as tightly as you can. B, you get their fist open in any way that you can. I'm going to time this for you. You've got 15 seconds. Ready, go. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Okay, stop.
Okay, stop. Trying to tickle there at the end. Okay, you have to stop now.
Let's see how many fists actually got opened.
Not many.
Okay, about 2. That's about average in a group this size. Is there anybody in need of medical attention? Sometimes that kind of happens. It came kind of close of it. If you didn't hurt your partner too badly, you can thank them, have a seat. We're going to talk about what you just did.
Go ahead.
Now, different people use different motivation techniques, unconsciously, automatically. Didn't really give you time to work out a strategy. How many of you use the basic force technique? There's a lot of that going on here. Now, when you started to apply force, didn't you pretty much know what the other person was they're going to resist? Yeah. It's like we know they're going to do exactly the opposite of what we want, but we do it anyway. Now, some people go beyond the force technique to what's called the pain technique. I don't know if you got that far. Yeah. Actually, it's not too difficult with this exercise. If you just put your finger right in between those two bones and press, it'll open very quickly. A little Aikido there. We did it with married couples one time, and partner A, big, strong, macho guy, he knew he could keep his fist closed, and his wife was just a little lady. And when we said go, she went like this, whack! And boy, did that fist open fast. So the pain technique gets results. It just has consequences you have to deal with. What other approaches did you try?
I started to tickle her, but I tried.
The tickling.
Tickling, distracting.
Dad, do you distract them?
I don't know that well.
Someone tried the asking politely technique. How did that work? Nah,
Worth a shot.
Any of you try the bribe technique? It's called the bonus, I did it with teenagers one time. One kid used the spitting technique. Now, different people have different ways that they automatically think of trying to motivate somebody else to reduce their resistance. But let me point out again what the instructions were. Partner A, your job was to make a fist as tightly as you can. Now, as soon as you had made your fist as tightly as you can, you were done. I didn't tell you that your job was to keep your fist closed for 15 seconds in order to keep partner B from getting their job done. If you did that, you made that decision. But you didn't hear it as your decision. You thought it's what I told you to do, part of the job description. or, you know, the way things are always done here at this company. Everybody knows that. That unconscious assumption influences the way that you behave and contributes stress and resistance. And then when the other person resists, you think, you see, I knew they were going to do that, which justifies why you had to do that. But we don't tend to see that we do things that add stress to the situation.
How many of you have ever had an argument with someone who was not in the room? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I mean, what are we doing there? We're actually preparing for the argument. But in our imagination, do we imagine it working out with them understanding and agreeing? No, we imagine their resistance. And then when we see them, we see that resistance. And then we respond as we practice. And see, I knew it. Our own stress of not knowing how to handle conflict well causes a lot of conflict. And if any of you are authorities, how many of you are an authority, have people report to you? Authorities have an extra burden, the mantle of authority. Because how many people grew up in a family where when there was a conflict, they ended up closer? Not many. Statistics are like 5%. So think about 95% of your employees got brought up with an authority who was not open to a disagreement. So how many of you had a parent that in the middle of an argument did this? I can tell this is important. What is it that you want me to know? Funny thought. Never, right? Not then, not now. Your employees have had that experience too. So even though I think most authorities are sincere when they say my door is always open, let me know when you have a problem, what do most employees think when they hear that? Yeah, right. They actually go in the opposite direction. So it takes a while to convince people that it is safe to disagree with you. But your emotion can sabotage that process. Just a roll of the eyes, just a in the wrong time can shut someone down from sharing with you what's important. So you're going to have to learn how to be a better model of it yourself. Let me give you the second definition of stress and its relationship to change, because I think this is the most proactive way of thinking about the whole thing. Second definition is stress is a signal that change is needed. I mean, the stress you experience, whose stress is it? It's yours. Now, we've been trained that it is a result of the circumstances and situations of our lives. It's the way we think and talk. This caused how I'm feeling. So if that's true, and I don't like how I'm feeling, what do I have to do? I got to change this. But it may be that I have something to do with how I'm feeling. And if that's true, then maybe I could change how I'm feeling, and that would affect how I behave, no matter the situation or the challenge. 95% of people don't know that. 95% of the people, I think 100 of us have a habit of worry. But if you notice this picture, the worry is pointing in a direction the person does not want to go. Isn't that what's true about worry? It's pointing in a direction you don't want to go. So the opposite of that is where you do want to go, right? What's that called? So let this sink in. The opposite of a worry is called a goal. You cannot prevent yourself from worry. But what you could learn to do is notice it quicker, faster, and flip it to its opposite, which is always a goal. And then take action towards that. I'm going to teach you how to do that today. Here's the third definition, and this is all you need to know. Stress occurs whenever I'm unable to create a successful image about change in my mind. Now, I learned this when I was a child. My mother read me a book. You know, the little train who thought he could, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I can. But we forget that in the middle of the challenges of the day. And I'll show you how and what to do about that. The trick is to learn how to believe that you can without knowing how. Most of us, if we can't see how we're going to solve the problem, we go into that we can't. I don't know how. But how often do you know everything? Hardly any time. Every success you've had, didn't you have to kind of figure out the how? So you already have the ability to believe that you can, even if you don't know how, in certain areas of your expertise. A problem comes, you don't worry about it, you'll figure it out. You just want to take that same ability that you already have in one area and apply it to everything. To learn how to turn from that automatic stress reaction to its opposite is the talent to develop. So every time you have that automatic stress reaction of holding your breath, tensing your muscles, having self-doubt, thinking negative, and getting serious, you want to flip it. What's the opposite of holding your breath? Yeah. Everybody take a deep breath. Okay, some of you need practice at that, I can tell. You know, we just don't open our breath up big, and you need to do that on a regular basis. Anyone heard the wives' tale about when you get upset, count to 10? Because in counting to 10, you'll take 10 breaths, and things can change in that. It breaks the trance of the stress just to take the breath. It's that important. It stops the process that's going just to take a breath. But it's more powerful if you take the next step. What's the opposite of tense muscles? Relax completely. Now, any movement that's happening in your body right now is because of muscle tension. So to be completely relaxed means to be absolutely still. Most of us have difficulty doing that and being awake, which is evidence of us being sleep deprived. So you want to learn how to be completely relaxed and awake. That's actually where creativity begins. To figure out the how, start by becoming relaxed. Edison and Einstein both did that to create new things. Learn how to reassure yourself. That's the opposite of self-doubt. Thinking that you can even without knowing how. Believing in your value and your worth without needing any evidence to support it. I mean, how many of you when you were in junior high were walking to school having this thought? Yes, so many people are going to be liking me today. Yes. I mean, how many of you are concerned about whether or not anyone's going to like you? You know, I certainly was. That's self-doubt. Now, no baby is born with that. Whatever self-doubt you have, you learned from someone who is infected with the same illness. Doubt about our value, doubt about our worth. Powerful, fundamental cause of much stress. So I want to practice breathing, relaxing, reassuring myself that, yeah, I've got difficult things to deal with. Yeah, I've got challenges. Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to handle it. But it's okay for me to have them. And thinking positive is not a Pollyannish thing. It's doing what Stephen Covey says in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin at the end. Actually imagining that goal, and then I'm going to figure out how to get there. We just tend to stay worried with, oh my gosh, how am I going to make this happen? And smile at the humor. So I'd like you to practice that this afternoon. Just when you leave here, just like walk out here, and for no reason, I want you to smile for 60 seconds. Just stand out there smiling. Now, just in your imagination, notice what you're thinking about what it would be like to do that. What will people think? I mean, just imagine walking downtown, and you're just smiling. You see someone smiling, bopping down the road. What do you think about them? You know, what's going on with them? We've been trained that we need an excuse to be happy. And it's not true. You do not need an excuse to experience joy. You can just cause it because you want to. But if you believe you can't, I can't be happy, I've got this challenge. I can't be happy, I've got to deal with this. This person wronged me. I have to be upset to prove to them how wrong what they did was. They don't care. You don't have to be in a miserable situation and also be miserable. Being in the miserable situation is bad enough. These ideas have made a profound difference in my life. When I got shot, I was walking home from the drugstore, car pulled up, driver got out, I thought he was going to ask directions. He came over and grabbed me, which I didn't expect. Somehow I was able to step out of his reach. He pulled out a gun from behind his belt, and you know, in such a startling moment, I actually didn't think about the gun. I didn't think about getting shot. I thought, well, he's going to rob me. Well, I breathed, I relaxed, I reassured myself in an instant because I've been practicing for 10 years, and I thought, that's okay. I'll give him the money I got, and I'll make more. So I just went through this little movie, what I'm going to say, what he's going to say, I'm going to say what he wants, he's going to say, give me your wallet, I'm going to give him the wallet, and that's going to be cool. So I just said, what do you want? And he smiled and shot me, which I didn't expect. That was like not part of my movie at all. So everybody take a deep breath. I'm the one who got shot, okay? But notice how you tense your muscles and hold your breath just at the thought, oh my God. See, the miracles are that the bullet stuck in the sternum. It didn't enter my body at all. It grabbed the shirt and spun the material around the bullet, and it created wadding, and I didn't bleed, not a drop. It didn't knock me down. I think it kind of scared the guy because they ran away, kind of da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And I turned to go to the first house with a light on, knocked on the door. The guy who opened the door was wearing operating clothes, which I thought was a good sign. That was encouraging. He was a heart surgeon. Not only that, he was one of the best heart surgeons in Houston. And I said, I think I've been shot. And he said, come in. When the ambulance came, I was not in pain. I was probably in shock, but I don't remember any pain from that. I've been hurt worse playing football. So I just got up to go out. They said, oh, no, you have to lay on this cot and we're going to have to take you out, And okay, so I got on the cot. Then they couldn't get me out of the house. It was around the corner. Okay, you're going to have to get off the cot. So, okay. You see, I was aware of the humor in the moment. I was breathing, relaxing, reassuring myself, thinking positive. I mean, isn't this a good story? I'm a speaker. What am I looking for all the time? I mean, I'm in the ambulance. This is a great story. I'm taking notes. Honest. Only because I'd been practicing this at the stoplight, in the grocery store line, when my kids are being kids, when the computer crashes, in the elementary school lessons in life. So when the graduate school lessons come, which they will, you got some muscle going. So you want to learn how to practice moving from the automatic stress reaction to the stress management response all throughout the day. So how many times are you going to have something not be the way you want it to be? I think maybe 20 times a day we're forced to stop and wait. So you're already good at the automatic stress reaction. You're already going to do that. What you want to learn how to do is notice it when you're doing it. Oh, that's not an automatic stress reaction. Don't beat yourself up. Don't go, oh, what am I doing getting stressed? You just add more stress to the stress. Breathe. Relax. Reassure yourself. Think positive. This will work out. And it'll be wonderful. And then look for some humor. And the more you practice that, the easier it's going to be to move through the stress as it's happening, stop it right then so it doesn't continue. So you don't build it up all throughout the day, which is what most people are doing. You actually go through the day reducing it throughout the day. Now, there are tools and techniques in each one of these that are helpful to learn, but that's generally the idea about it. So we all got this habit. It's all automatic reactions. It's happening to all of us all the time. And these things influence us. And those who know us well, like I said, know how to punch our buttons. So here's the basic principle. What I'm unaware of controls me. What I become aware of, I can change. Okay? One way of thinking about it is life is a school, and your report card is how you're feeling. And when you're experiencing stress, you're not learning the lesson. Because in that moment, by definition, you don't know how to handle it. And you're frightening yourself about how horrible it is that I have to have this challenge. Now, I've been through that. As my wife got worse and worse, I had to do more and more. And I remember every time that happened, I was going, wow, I didn't know there was going to be this much. I didn't know there was going to be this much. And it kept being, this is more than ever. And then there was more, and then there was more, and then there was more. Now, what had to be let go of is I didn't get as much done. So learning how to balance life and work. When you have more and more challenges, where you're going to have to reach some balances, you're not going to get everything done. Now, isn't it true that you got more to do right now than you can get done? And if you had someone hired to take over everything, wouldn't you have like months worth of stuff just to catch up? And isn't it true that when you die, you're going to die with things not done? I'm sorry. It's true. Some of you may want to try to tie it up with a bow so no one has to do anything and you did it all, but probably ain't going to happen. So here's something that's true about you, but it's also true about others, and if you know it, it'll be helpful to you, and that is how you think creates emotion. Unless you have some neurological or chemical damage, this is true. How you think causes how you feel. And how you feel expresses as behaviors. Your positive behaviors are caused by positive emotion, caused by positive thoughts. And the worst that things will ever be is just ineffective. That's the worst you'll be. You just won't be producing the results you want. Ineffective. Only because you didn't learn how to deal with it any better. So one of my greatest difficulties that created much stress in my life is I had difficulty asking for help. So I have like a whole chapter about the importance of that. Because particularly as we as entrepreneurs grow our business, there comes a time when we need help to keep it growing. Otherwise, what happens is you will collapse the business to redo what you already know you're successful at. Seen that happen over and over again. So when an entrepreneur grows the business to a certain level, they have to change their job. They have to change what they've been doing. They have to have other people do what they've been doing, so now they can do other things. They have other people take over parts. That's a very difficult transition for most people, because now you have to do these things you never did before. But your business depends on you making that change. Otherwise, you'll just keep failing and at the same level and succeeding. So to take it to a new level, you have to get more help. And I found that sometimes I was doing a lot of things that if I paid someone else to do, I actually could go make more money with my time to afford them. I started out hiring someone part-time because I couldn't afford to do it anymore, you know. But then I made money to hire them full-time. And then there was a time when we had like about 12 people working for us. I kind of knew what I was going to do at 7 in the morning. You know, it was just like, I'm either going to have to stop doing this, or I'm going to have to figure out some way to do it differently, or I'm going to have to do something else. And what I realized that transformed everything for me is, even though I'm presenting what I have done many, many times, how many of you, this is the first time you're hearing what I'm saying? See? So I started focusing more on the audience's experience than my experience. Start focusing more on your customer's experience than your experience. And that'll energize you to produce even better service and product. So here's what's true also about everybody. Everybody thinks that whether I think I can or I think I can't, I'm right. Have you noticed that about yourself? All your stress happens when you think you can't. When I think I can't, I'm doubting my ability to learn how to deal with this situation, to get the help I need, to change in the way I need to change. I'm having a doubt about it, and I get stuck in that loop for some time until I realize that the difference between thinking that I can and thinking that I can't is whether or not I know how. And like I was saying, you don't have to know the how to believe that you can. If school taught us nothing but that, I think we could learn everything else. But unfortunately, most kids by this time they're in the second grade already don't think of themselves as a learner. In fact, learning is negative. It's a bad thing. When kids are bored, any of you have teenagers that are ever bored? You know, the answer to boredom is go learn something that's exciting to you. But in their mind, learning is already painful. So when I would say go learn something, you know. But that's the key. So I want to read this because I like what it says. Leaders lead in good times and in bad. When times are challenging, when resources and opportunities are limited, that's when they're needed. The way forward is full of unknowns, and when there's no guaranteed path of success. How many of you are living that all the time? Isn't that like the condition of being self-employed and owning a business? That's just the way it is. In such times, you need to be both optimistic and realistic. You need to balance faith and responsibility. Addressing the worries while maintaining hope. It's not about denying one. It's actually, I want to teach you how to work through one. Nature of reality, everything has cycles of expansion and contraction, one following another. It's just the way things are. We tend to want them always to be up and always growing, and that's just not the way reality is. You know, the whole yin and yang of things. But what we can learn how to do is really kind of expand the good times and maybe reduce the bad times. That is a possible thing that leaders can do. So what do successful leaders do that help them find that upside more and reduce the down times? You may not have thought about it, but my focus and what I've learned is that they know how to productively deal with worry, their own and their employees. And to do that, you have to realize that it's a natural thing. people are going to have resistance to change. And if you don't take a moment to listen to it and hear it, it will create more problems. We worked with one company who traditionally, when they make changes, what they do is they get a PowerPoint, they get everybody together and say, this is the change we're going to make, are there any questions? The change this particular company was making is 1/3 of you are going to lose your job during this year, and we want you to train the people who are going to take your job. Are there any questions? What kind of reaction would that have, and what kind of conversation would go on after that, et cetera? So what we did is we created a process where supervisors were trained to prepare to deal with that a week before. That had never been done because they didn't trust their supervisors with the news. We convinced them to take that risk so that supervisors could be helpful to their employees. Then we went through a process of, as soon as the information was presented, we actually presented the PowerPoint in a particular way to cover the purpose, plan, parts, things like that. So it was structured well. Then we had them fill out a worksheet of, how does this affect me? How does this affect my family? How does this affect my department? How does this affect the team? And work with their supervisors. Supervisors have been trained to listen and understand, and then got the supervisors all in the middle of the room with the manager in kind of a fishbowl, so that everyone had this experience of being understood about this change. Then we did a Post-it note experience around the room where they put up recommendations for how to deal with these challenges. So now people can get engaged in figuring out the how once they've been understood about the experience and the worry. This is the truth about human beings. People will tolerate a disagreement when they experience being understood. They will not tolerate not being understood. And most leaders skip that. I came up with the right answer. This is what you're supposed to go do. They don't know the 30 management principles of the U.S. Marines. One of them is decide and then invite dissent. So it's fine to say this is the direction we're going to go, but it's important to stop and say, so what problems are we going to face going in that direction? Let me hear what the challenges are and the problems and the frustrations of that. And let's see what are those that we can address, or we may not be able to address any of them. Let me have you tell them about the government agency that we worked with and that change.
This was a situation where a government agency had had a policy for decades that people got overtime rate pay. Well, somebody upstairs decided we're going to change that policy, and so the superintendent got all of the supervisors together and said there's going to be no more overtime pay. Anybody who works overtime will work just at the regular salary rate. Now this is for people who have worked in this organization for like 20 or 30 years. They've been getting overtime pay for that long. They don't think of it as overtime. They think of it as part of their base salary.
20%.
Their mortgages are based on this. Their kids' educations are based on this. So he just makes this announcement. No more overtime pay after the meeting. I want you to go back and let your folks know and figure out how you're going to handle scheduling. Any questions? And there was a stunned look on people's faces. They didn't know how they were going to go deliver this news, because obviously nobody had any questions because they were stunned. And he was just going to go on with the meeting. We happened to be there, and so Rob said, oh, wait, let's just check and see. Nobody had any questions. Do you think that people don't actually have questions because they didn't speak up? And so the superintendent said, well, yeah, because nobody said anything. Let's find out. And so we just had them do a little activity where the people at each table, just kind of like this setup here, they made a list of what are the concerns that you think employees are going to have. How is this going to impact their family, their finances, their schedules, their career? And then we had them share that list. Each table would share that list with the superintendent, and Rob kind of led them through the superintendent, not trying to answer every question, but just reflecting back, yeah, that's going to be difficult. I understand, it's unfortunate, but it's the direction that we're going. That's all we did. And at the end, those superintendents walked out saying, that was the best management meeting we ever had. And nothing changed.
They still had to go talk to their employees.
But they felt more capable of doing that because their concerns were heard and understood.
Remember, the parent goes, oh, I can tell this is important. What is it you want me to know? You're an authority. And there are times when you need to do that, to find out what's in the way of people either seeing what you want them to see or doing what you want them to do.
But very often, we don't take the time to do that because we think, oh, it's going to take so much time,
so
and
conflict, and we're
people are
doing
just going to be
arguments.
complaining. I don't want to hear their complaints. That's not going to be productive. The difficulty is if you don't understand, and if they don't feel understood, you might actually already understand it.
Probably do.
If they don't feel understood, they're going to resist, and boy, does that take a lot of time to deal with. All the problems that happen as a result of their resistance, that's infectious. Taking a little time up front so that they confirm that you understand is a good investment of time.
Now, to help you have a compassion for the challenges of dealing with other people's worries, I want to kind of take you through an example that might be more relevant for you as a business owner around a worry. So, how many of you have ever had, for instance, a need for more business, like now? Remember that was a... And so how many of you have experienced some worry about not having enough? You know what your expenses are, you don't know where the income's coming from. Everybody had that experience? Okay. Now, how often have you actually gotten business? I mean, haven't that happened? Or how often did you worry about not getting it while you were getting it? So why are we doing that? Well, let's take that a little farther. Let's say that you don't get the business. Then, if you've got a board or investors, they're going to get threatening and upset with you. Maybe that'll be your spouse in some circumstances. What are you doing, not getting the income we need? And that could add more worry. Let's say that, then what happens? Let's say you don't get the business. That's a nice word for you're going to have to close the business. Now, why is that such a bad thing? No money. Now, it's interesting, the way we say that is no money ever, but how about getting new business? Actually starting a new business. Have you ever thought about that? How many of you have already done that? Had one business, ended that, started a new business, et cetera? We've actually done it 2 or 3 times, actually probably more than that. And some work, some don't. But it's a constant process, and you can get stuck in one that maybe not work anymore, like, spats. Anyone remember spats? Something that, it's a thing that guys used to have over their shoes in the 1890s. And, yes. I wasn't there then. Oh my gracious, I'm sorry. I'll go through this again. So what I'm saying is that underneath every worry is really another worry about what bad will happen. So if we lose the business, then we have no money ever. Then that's bad because then we'll lose our house, and our spouse. Some spouses go with a house, that's kind of part of the deal. But what are the chances of getting a new spouse with a bigger house? Hadn't thought of that, huh? But let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say we lose everything. We lose our house, our kids go into foster homes. What happens to us? Now, what do bag people worry about? Oh, no. They worry about being a bagless bag person. Right? Out there protecting their bag, but hey, you can get a new bag. Now, worry always just goes down the tubes. It never takes the roller coaster back up to something better. It never flips it to the goal. So you want to learn to notice this in yourself so that you have some compassion when someone else is doing it, and you don't want to jump on, oh, don't worry about that, it'll all be okay. Haven't you had a friend that you tried to be encouraging to, and when you did something like, oh, don't worry about that, it'll be, how did they react to that? Oh, you don't understand. And they actually held on to the point of view you're trying to get them to get rid of. So the timing was off. You need to be willing to hear until they experience being understood. There's a difference between you having an accurate understanding and the other person experiencing being understood. Those are 2 different things. You need to have both happen if you want to move their mind. How to influence a person to change from their point of view to yours requires them to experience being understood first, and then for you to agree with as much as possible. Bag person syndrome. So it's a habit. So let's learn how to deal with it on purpose. Let's learn how to recognize it as something we don't want and flip it to its positive opposite, which is what we do want, which is called a goal. And you can do it all throughout the day. When you're stopped at the stoplight, what's the fear, the worry at that moment? You're not going to get somewhere on time. Anyone had that worry here as you got through traffic? But how many of you ended up here before the session began? So what were you doing? Practicing being upset? See, my guess is you know how. If you ever actually have to, you don't need to practice anymore. But we just do it unconsciously and automatically and without even thought. Somehow we think that's the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do. So what I'd like you to do is just on the back of the evaluation or somewhere on a piece of paper, I'd like you to just write down, there are 2 stresses at work, 2 stresses at home. I just want you to get one in your mind. Just one stress at work, one stress at home. Just get one. One you'd be willing to talk about with the partner you did the fist exercise with, or the person who's sitting next to you. And you don't have to write a lot, just a word that kind of captures it for you. And I'm going to take you kind of down this whole process. What I'd like to do is have you now answer the question about that stressful thing. Why is that so bad? What bad could happen? And whatever comes to mind, just write it down. So whatever you've written down, now just ask yourself, why is that so bad? What bad could happen? Now I'd like you to take your hand and put it over the first thing that you wrote down, so all you can see is the second thing you wrote down. This is an important step. So just look at the second thing. And I want you to imagine that being real. Imagine that's what's true right now. Ooh, you already had a little emotional wave on that. Oh, God. Yeah, it's going to be bad. So imagine that being real. Now ask yourself the same question. Why is that so bad? What bad could happen? And you'll come up with something worse. And write that down. So I have a bunch of stacks on my desk at one time, and why was that so bad? Because there's important work there, not getting addressed. And why is that bad? Well, I'm not going to be getting back to clients, and then they'll be upset. I'll get a bad reputation. And then why is that bad? Well, I'm going to lose business. Well, Robbie doesn't even return my phone calls, and I want to hire him. And what's going on with this guy? And then I'm not going to have enough money to have my staff or my partners. And then I'm going to be alone again. Because I started out by myself for about 8 years, and that was difficult. And so that would have meaning to me. The meaning is I'd be a failure. And then I'd probably have to be depressed, and can't be a depressed psychologist, and so probably have to find a new career. Now, what I want you to do is go down your list. Now, watch. You may have a tendency to flip it back to something positive. Don't do that right now. I want you to keep taking it down the tubes. But cover up everything but the last thing. Cover up everything but the last thing with your hand or something so that you can only see the last thing. Then take a moment to imagine that being real. And it's going to get bad. I mean, you're going to be imagining horrible things. That's the purpose of the exercise. And then ask yourself, why is that so bad? What bad could happen? And you'll come up with something worse, and write that down. So just kind of take it down the tubes here for a moment for yourself. Now, if you get down to where, you die in the gutter, or you have to move back in with your parents or something, then you can probably stop. Into a mental hospital, something like that. But you want to take it down about 7 levels. Because usually we're aware of the first 2 or 3, but you may not be aware that the others are underneath that, and that's really what makes the first 2 or 3 frightening and worrisome, is what might happen bad. So worrying on purpose is actually going down this process of what is the worry that's underneath this worry, and then what's the one that's underneath that worry, and finding out what's at the bottom for me. And if you only do it 2 or 3 levels, you may not get to what's at the bottom for you. Okay. Now, that's the first part in a 4-part process of turning worries into action plans towards a goal. Worry on purpose, take it down. Now, the second one is to look at the last thing on the list. How many of you have the last thing on the list is something that's happening right now while you're sitting in this chair? Probably not. Maybe a few. We'll need to check with you. For me, did I have to find a new career? No. What was true? I had an actually great career. My career was fine. So you want to look at the bottom one and ask yourself, is this true and real and happening right now? Not that you're worried about it, but is what you're worried about actually happening? And if it's not, then I would like you to write what is true in regards to that. And if you're worried about losing your house, well, what is true? Well, I got my house, and I'm paying my mortgage. So for each thing, start at the bottom and work your way back up. So am I depressed? No, I'm pretty happy. Am I a failure? No. Actually, at the time I was more successful than I'd ever been. Am I alone? I have partners, actually more. Losing staff, I've got more partners. I'm gaining, I'm telling myself the truth. And I didn't even realize that actually I was more successful than I'd ever been at the moment I was doing this. Stephen was helping me go through this process. And when he asked, well, so Rob, what is true about you being a failure? He could have told me I was more successful than I'd ever been, but I wasn't telling it to myself. So this helped me say what was true, what the reality was. Bad reputation, I think we've got a great reputation. Clients not being reached, actually, yeah, I was still having phone numbers I wasn't getting back to. Yeah, there was important work we weren't getting done. There was piles of stuff, and I still had stuff on my desk. So there was a line that you find. Below the line is things that are not real, and above the line, the things that are real, that are true. So find out where your line is. Below the line is fantasy. Worry is always a fantasy about something bad happening in the future. When I had the guy come at me with a gun, I mean, my worry was not about getting shot at the moment. It was about getting robbed. I hadn't thought enough to get more scared. Now, the third step has to do with taking the first thing that's below the line, what's called the first worry or first fearful fantasy, and flipping it to its positive opposite called a goal. So what I want you to do is take that first thing that's below the line, and I want you to restate it in its positive opposite. Now don't say, not this. That's a double negative. Say what the positive is. So if the worry is having to lose customers, what's the positive opposite? Gain customers. But I'd like you to, once you get it positive, see if you can bump it a little bit more positive. Like gain more customers, not just gain customers. So when we did this, and also you have situations that whatever's above the line, you want to try to gear towards the goal. So my things above the line is I had stacks of stuff, and it was hard for me to get my mind around it, but I enjoyed, in a way, talking. I'm a very extroverted kind of guy. And so if, Stephen or someone could come and we could just kind of sit with the stacks and go through and talk, and I could get my way through it. So you come up with actions that you can take that lead you towards the goal. Not one action produces the goal, but you can come up with an action that's in the direction of the goal, ideally based on what your reality is. So as you've defined the goal, then look at anything that's above the line and see if you can come up with an action or two that would lead you in the direction of the goal. Because once you take those actions, then maybe you could find another action. So we came up with one goal was to create an amazing, world-class reputation. And one of the things we want to do is do more work internationally. So we changed the name from Resource Associates to Resource International. We hired a person to do marketing for us in Europe. And we ended up doing many, many months of work over there every year for many years. In fact, later this summer, I'm going to go back for a 20th anniversary of annual week-long retreat that we started 20 years ago for about 150 people that has continued ever since. And so that's a very exciting thing that we never would have planned, but we took action to move in that direction. Now, when you've practiced this little process for a few times, about 20 times, what happens is your mind just starts to think in this way. And you actually can short-circuit it. And you can see the worry, you can flip it to a goal, and you can immediately start taking action towards the goal. but it's helpful to deal with this on a very detailed step-by-step process for some of your biggest worries. The ones you keep finding yourself at night thinking about, those are ones you're not using this process on to help you learn how to speed through it quicker. And some things require help. Good if you have a partner who's interested in these things too. And some things require medication, so that's just part of it. Because there are only a few choices you have here, people. You can either come up with actions that take you towards the goal, or if you find yourself continuing to worry about something, you probably need to come up with a plan. Okay, I'm continually worrying about this. Let me come up with a plan of what I will do if I ever do have to deal with that. So then you don't have to worry about it anymore. I got a plan. And that's a smart thing to do. Okay? But if you don't come up with an action towards it based on reality, or a plan towards the goal based on the fantasy, you only got one other option, and that's to worry, which you're already probably pretty good at. Okay? Does this seem helpful? As you work with this yourself, then when you have your employees express their worry, I'm not recommending you take them through this process. I am recommending that you just say, oh, well, tell me more about that. Is there anything else? Is that all? And repeat what they're saying to you so they hear their words coming out of your mouth so they can experience being some understood about. And anything you can agree with, do. And there's audio, we'll send you links on all of this. To speed through stress as an individual, you have an upsetting event and you're going to crash, but over a period of time you're going to go back to your normal level, whatever that is. That's kind of the way it works. But if you could have a new response where you have awareness come in of what's happening, awareness of that automatic stress reaction, and then actually have an alternative, because just recognizing is not sufficient for change. You can actually feel guilt if you just got stuck at the awareness. So you have to have the awareness of an alternative, and that would be, in this case, a stress management response. And that's what you practice on a regular basis. And as a result of that, then you actually learn how to shorten the distance of how long it takes for you to get back up to your normal state. And you get so good at this that actually no one else has to deal with the fact that you were stressed. See, so people compliment me for, just how calm I am in my mood, and I seem to be like this kind of basically happy guy. And I am to a great extent, but it implies that I don't have stress. I've got massive amount of stress. But other people don't have to deal with it. It's mine to deal with. And it's all evidence of lessons unlearned, and I want to learn the lessons in my life. And so I use that as evidence of when I need to give attention, and sometimes I need help to deal with that. But the lack of time and money are not our greatest stressors. It's really in our relationships, as I was saying earlier. So I want to give you some tools and techniques for how to deal with that in a better way, both at work and at home, because no one's healthier at work than they are at home. At home is where we're more vulnerable, and we tend to be more emotionally available there, and so we tend to get triggered more intensely there. But if you can learn how to deal with it there, you'll be much better at work. All of our challenges in relationships, I think, primarily come from one thing: disagreements. So how do we eliminate the majority of disagreement in our life? Let me just ask you this question. What percent of the disagreement in your life do you think might be because of a misunderstanding? How many of you think 50% or more? Anybody? Anybody think 75% or more? Anybody think 90% or more? So the majority think the majority are because of a misunderstanding. Okay, now let's just look at that. The disagreement that is in fact because of a misunderstanding. What percent of that is because you misunderstand? Okay, some of you are willing to admit to some responsibility in that. It's very enlightened of you. How many of you came up with a smaller number, though? Now, what percent of that, think about it. When you're in the middle of an argument, what percent of the time do you think you're right? In the middle of an argument? 100%, right? And when you think you're right, what is your job right then? To convince them. Just trying to be helpful, aren't we? But what percent of the time when we know we're right and we know they're wrong and we try to convince them that they're wrong, what percent of the time are they grateful? Zero. But what percent of the time do we do it? All the time. You do that a few times with a new employee, they're not going to share as much with you anymore. What decision have they made about you as an authority? You're not open to disagreement. See, you may want them just to get in there and mix it up with you. You want them to go, no, that's not right. You need to think about this. If you can fire them, they're not going to do that. You have to create a safety. You have to actually be curious about their opinion if it's different than yours. You have the authority. Nobody can take that. You can be generous. You can set it aside long enough to give them an idea that might be helpful. And here's a powerful insight. If it's true that the majority of our disagreement is because of a misunderstanding, when we discover the misunderstanding, what happens to the disagreement? Goes away. And what's left? Now let this one sink in. What that means is a majority of the time in our lives, when we experience a very real disagreement, the truth is that a majority of the time, some of you thought 90% of the time, an agreement already exists that we would agree to and they would agree to. We don't have to negotiate. We don't have to compromise on anything. We don't see it because we believe the misunderstanding to be correct. And we will destroy our relationships with our spouse, with our kids. We will destroy our health. We'll destroy our businesses in order to be right. There's a woman named Betty Rogers. She's buried in Coral Gables, Florida, and she had inscribed on her tombstone, "See, I told you I was right." Now this tells us, I said that wrong, didn't I? Yeah, what she said on it is, "See, I told you I was sick." She was right about that. And she's proving it. She died to make a point. "See, I told you I was sick." We all have that tendency. It's just like the automatic stress reaction. Here you are with your ideas, and what do you believe about your ideas? What percent of them? All of them. Here's the other person with their ideas. What do they believe about theirs? Okay, now you're trying to get your ideas into them. They're trying to get their ideas into you. This is called an argument. How many of you have an opinion about me getting water on the floor? What's he doing? What's in the way of our ideas getting into them? They're all full of their ideas. Now, what's our opinion about their ideas? They're wrong. And how open are they to hearing that? Not. In fact, the more we tell them that, the more they hold on to those ideas because we don't understand. So here's all you got to do. Take your ideas, because they're not going anywhere because they are the right ideas. Just set them aside a while and create a little empty space in you, just like when you're creating a new folder on your computer to put new information in. Just create like an empty folder in your mind for their ideas and just say, wow, I can tell this is important. What is it you want me to know? Just an insight. Anytime anyone's angry, one of the things they're telling you is that it's important to them. They're also telling you they don't think you want to hear. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to get angry. They would just tell you. So anytime anyone's angry, they're telling you it's important, and they're telling you you don't want to hear it. So the first thing you want to do is not deal with the content, deal with that and go, oh, wow, I can tell this is important. What is it you want me to know? And when you say that, what are they going to do?
Share their ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there's this and this and this. Now, you're going to have opinions about it. You just don't say it right then. What you want to do is take it and mirror it back. You want to, so there's this and this and this, matching their tone. And if you do it correctly, they'll go, yeah! You heard me. Now, you may think you've done a great job, which you have, and you may think it's your turn right now, which it isn't. You have to go for the second question, which is there anything else? What are the chances there's something else? Oh, well, there's that and that. Oh, there's that and that, and this and this and this. Yes. Now you're going to feel really good because you've done more people have ever done. And you'll think it's your turn. And it's not. There's a third question. The third question is that all? What are the chances there might be a little bit more? And it's real funny when you get to this point and you say, is that all? They often say the same thing. They'll say, well, because you asked, which means you weren't going to get it. But because you've demonstrated caring, commitment, communication, they're going to give you, well, there's this. Oh, this, yes, this. How many times is the last this what it was all about? And if you didn't go through the that and the that and the this, you wouldn't have gotten to that last little this. Now, this is a very powerful moment. As a leader, you want to be influential. At this moment, you already know everything you know. Now you know everything they know. They only know what they know. Power to influence flows to the person with the most information. You haven't changed your opinion, but now you have more information. Maybe they might know something you didn't know. Oh, my gracious, thank you for pointing that out. Save you time. If you're still right in your opinion, at least now you know what's in the way of them seeing what you see. They can't see what you see because they see this. You have to be able to get around and look at it from their point of view so that you lay breadcrumbs of questions that they would agree to get them from their point of view to yours. If you can't do that, either there's something wrong about your point of view or you don't know enough about theirs. In either case, it's valuable for you to be generous with your authority, to be interested in influence, and to be willing the person who's open to asking, what is it you want me to know? How many of you think you're going to have a disagreement in the next few days? It's 24 hours. Get the person in mind, yeah.
Can you just briefly say again the questions, like the
Sure.
steps again?
How about this? What is it you want me to know? Is there anything else? Is that all? Breathe, relax, reassure yourself. And I want to present these together because for most of us in the middle of a conflict, there's this emotional wave that hits us that causes us to forget any communication skill. Have you noticed that? So if you're practicing moving from that automatic stress reaction to the stress management response to speed through the stress that you're experiencing and all those frustrations all throughout the day, then in the moment when it really counts, when you're in the middle of an argument with someone whose relationship is important to you, you can do it then too, long enough to remember one question. What is it you want me to know? That's all you got to remember. Because as soon as you remember that, while they're talking, a part of you is going to go, now what was the second question? There was another question. What was the second question? Oh, anything else? Yeah. Just remember, what is it you want me to know? We work a lot with the material of Patrick Lencioni. Any leader, let me recommend that you go and get his materials. One of them is called Death by Meeting, which is great. Another is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Another, Silos, Turf Wars, and Politics. The neat thing about Lencioni, I like, not just the accuracy of his insights, but his books are novels. They're stories. They're entertaining and fun to read. And then the last chapter is, like what was the successful person doing that you ought to be doing? And it's just a very powerful way of getting an organization to recognize they have some needs. So a lot of times when someone calls us to come and do some work, we want to say, great, let's talk about it, and then let's have some people read some books, and give us some feedback. Do you think this is relevant or not? Because it immediately is a diagnostic tool, and everybody goes, oh, well, that's so it's a real powerful thing. And I want to give you some examples from Stephen and I's relationship about how we've dealt with applying the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Early in our relationship, we had a lot of tensions and conflicts about this. We didn't know what we know now.
You can probably tell that Rob is an extrovert. He thinks with his mouth open. If his mouth's not open, he's not thinking. And that's the way he works through his thinking process. And if you've ever worked with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, that's what extrovert means. It means that they process their thinking through interaction with others.
My thinking is a public experience.
Yeah.
I want people to participate.
I'm an introvert. My thinking is a private experience. I like to reflect internally and process all the information and all the options and decisions before I come out with a conclusion. That's what's comfortable and stimulating. It helps me generate energy. Rob will get an idea in his office.
And I'm really excited about it. Ooh, this is nice. Ooh, look how this works. This is really cool. And I want Stephen to be involved in this. So I'm walking to share this idea. When do you think I start talking to him?
Before you get there.
Yeah, in the hallway.
He's walking down the hallway. Now, I'm sitting in my office at my computer typing away, and I'm really focused on what I'm doing. And I hear him coming down the hallway talking to me. But at this point, it's just a bunch of noise. Because my mind is focused internally, and his words just interrupt that. Any of you who relates to the introverted approach that I'm talking about, you've had this experience where someone starts to talk and your mind just stops. I can't remember what I was writing, but I haven't been able to shift and interact on what he's talking about.
For introverts, other people's words are louder than their thoughts. For extroverts, our thoughts are louder than other people's words. Can you see some potential source of conflict?
So he walks into the room and he starts.
Hey, listen, this is great. I think we should get these. I think they're really neat. They really work really well, much better than all the others we've got. What do you think?
Well, I don't know what I think because I haven't had time to think about it. You know, I've got to reflect and think before I can come up with a good judgment about this thing.
But he doesn't say that.
No, I go.
He's thinking this.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, now what's my judgment about his interest in this? Well,
Is that valid that I have no interest in it?
No.
Not necessarily. Yeah, I haven't thought about it. How do I know what my interest is? So later, when I've had time to give it productive thought so that I have a valid opinion, I'll come back and say, Rob, what I think we ought to do is this.
oh, I ordered 1,000.
And my thought is, why should I even bother? You know,
Does
when I go ahead and express what I think, he just goes off and does something else anyway. So, you know, next time he asks, I'll just say whatever you want.
So is he feeling valued and respected?
No.
Now, if he told me, Rob, you don't value and respect my opinion, what would be my response to that? Of course I do. There's my evidence. So can you see that people have different points of view that cause pain, hurt, and anger that really is a misunderstanding of why the other person is behaving the way they did?
We tend to judge the other person based on what it would mean if I behaved that way. You know, if I asked Rob a question and he had said nothing, yeah, that would mean that he has an opinion that he's hiding. But he's not. He doesn't do that.
Other problem we had that's related to this that helped us move from the challenges we had to having what's called a cohesive team, and a cohesive team is not one with no conflict. The definition of a functional team is that they constructively address their dysfunction. Not that they don't have any, but they have the skill and the ability to address it successfully. That requires training because, again, hardly anybody grew up in a family like that. So we would be meeting, we'd make a decision to do something.
Now, to me, when you make a decision, that's a decision. You're going to take action. So we'll make a decision on a project, and I'll start moving ahead on that project. And I'm spending money, and I'm making plans, and I'm setting things in motion. And 2 days later, Rob comes in because he's been on the internet that whole time looking for other possibilities. And he says, oh, I've got this completely different way that we could do this. And I'm thinking, whoa, I thought we made a decision about this 2 days ago. I can't change course every time you come up with a new possibility. We can't afford that. And we'll never get anything done because we're always making changes. To Rob,
see, no decision is final. It's just the best we've come up with so far. And what we want to do is have the best decisions we can.
and this is the difficulty, which one of us is right? Should we just keep on going down this path, even though this is a better decision? And we would get caught in this struggle about who's right.
Because my strength is really in being creative and finding new possibilities, but my weakness is in finishing the task, in getting it completed and closing the door on other options. That's takes effort on my part.
So we've had to come up with some agreements for how to deal with these differences, because he's always going to be like that, and I'm always going to be like that, and having those differences is actually what makes us work well together.
So one of the things that we do in those moments when we're reaching a decision is Stephen will ask.
So he'll come up with a possibility, and I'll hear that, and I'm thinking, do I have to take action on this, or is he just like, throwing out possibilities? I'll say, so Rob, is this a decision?
And that means a whole lot to me now. And I'll think about it, because it means if I say yes, I have to stop thinking about this.
He's got to let me go ahead and move on.
I've got to go with this as it is, and it's not going to get any better, at least for now.
And at some point, I may need to say, Rob, having all these possibilities is great. We need to come to a decision so we can act.
So now I'm not feeling criticized in that. I'm feeling helped in that. It's helping me deal with my blind spot, with an area where I have difficulty. And we work that out with some of these little phrases that are so important to us.
I've had to learn to talk without having thought something through. I've had to learn to just go into Rob's office and sit down and say, what are you thinking? And just start talking about it.
But he's been very helpful, because he doesn't want to say something he hasn't thought about and have me go and act on it. So he'll say something like, don't hold me to this.
Yeah, it used to be, I was always in this little struggle that people would want to hear my thoughts, and then I would say, well, I think we should do this. And they would expect that I have already thought about all the possibilities, and this is the thing to do. So am I supposed to only tell them the plans that end up in the right decision, or am I supposed to brainstorm? Now I just know that I need to qualify my thoughts. Don't hold me to this. This stuff off the top of my head. I'm just trying to run this one out here. Rob doesn't have to say that. Everything's off the top of his head.
So you learn how to pull out the strengths, and you learn how to work with the blind spots of the other person. And that's a helpful thing.
Yeah, and not take it personally.
And not take it personally. Sometimes we do surveys of people and teams that we're working with. This is actual results of one team on Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions. And trust of a leader is not what we think it is. It's not being consistent and saying what you believe. The trust, and this is just the range of scores, trust is about being vulnerable. Trust is about being willing to say, I don't know. Because if you can't do that as the leader, you're not going to allow your employees to do it. And you want to know when they don't know. Then it becomes something that maybe we need to work on. But you have to be willing to say that and model that before we can actually have what they call ideological conflict. So we can have differences, but we don't take it personally. And that's a skill that's learnable. Most of us, anytime we feel uncomfortable, we make a negative judgment. If I'm uncomfortable, there's something wrong. If someone did something and I feel uncomfortable, then what they did was wrong. And we don't just judge their behavior as negative, we judge their motive about why they're doing that. Disrespectful, not caring, unappreciative. See all the times that Stephen and I did that with each other, when it wasn't what was happening. And then we react. And when we react in those moments, does it make the person comfortable or uncomfortable? Uncomfortable. It's guaranteed. It was our purpose. We wanted them to know how we were feeling, but it triggers in them the same response, and now we're off into this conflict, and each of us thinks we're right about the other being wrong. But it can all be avoided so easily. Breathe, relax, reassure yourself. What is it you want me to know? That's you. Any change from the top down. So how you are with your direct reports is key to the success of your organization. And the decisions that you make affect everything. Now let me go through a little process here just as we're ending to give you an insight about how to use your authority. Because a lot of us in authority positions have some challenges about that. And there's really just 2 things you need to do when you're facilitating a decision with the team. So first, there's this rather complex model, but I'm going to go through it in pieces so you can see how simple it really is. You take a survey just asking, what do you all think? And you find out, are we all in agreement? If we're all in agreement, then that's simple. That's called a unanimous decision. Okay? But that's not usually the case. Usually there's a difference. So you have a majority and a minority. Now, usually when they have a majority and a minority, who speaks next? Usually the majority tries to convince the minority, hey, we're all already down this road. We just need to get you to join us. What's wrong with you guys? And that creates defensiveness in the minority on their position. So we recommend exactly the opposite. We recommend an understanding position, what we've recommended interpersonally applied to the group, so the majority restates the minority's reason for being the minority. And then the question is, does the minority feel understood? Do they experience that? If the answer is no, then you do it some more. But at some point, the majority has done it correctly. The minority is going to say, yeah, you got it. Now the question is, are there any changes as a result of that? Oh, there's a misunderstanding. Oh, that's what you meant. Oh, okay, we'll do it that way. And if there are, then you restate it, and maybe you got another unanimous decision. But maybe not. Maybe no. We do understand, but there is a very real difference. Okay, now the fundamental question is of the minority, then, are you willing to live with, support, and not sabotage the majority? If the answer is yes, then this is what consensus is. Consensus is confused with unanimous. Consensus, not everyone thinks it's the best decision, but we're willing to support it and not sabotage it. But let's say, no, this isn't too important. The minority goes, no, 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 we have to have it this way. So then the question is there any negotiation? So when you're in a conflict with someone, here's the question to ask yourself, because you're into a polarity their way, your way. The question you want to ask is, what would it take for me to want to do what they want me to do? What would it take for me to want to do? See, I don't want to do it. We're in conflict. So I'm asking myself, what would it take for me to want to do that? I think if you ask yourself the question, a majority of the time we would come up with something. Okay, for me to want to do that, I'd need this. I think a majority of the time they'll agree to it. Not all the time. But it opens up doors for negotiation. Try it with your kids. It makes a big difference. And you can get back around again. But let's say no, there's no possibility of negotiation. Now I need to just slide this up so we can get to the bottom part of this flow chart. So what happens when there's no possibility? Then the question is, okay, majority, we can't work anything out. Are you willing to impose the decision, risking sabotage from the minority? This is the way the legislature works. And that's called a majority decision. I don't care what they think, we're going to do it our way. We got the votes. That's what a majority decision is. Always risks sabotage and lack of support by the minority. Maybe there's some decisions you want to do that with. But at some point they may say, no, this is too important. We don't want to do that. We want to try to work something out. But then you can be paralyzed with a lack of decision. So at some point, and here's the purpose of an authority, is basically to break the tie, to come in and say, okay guys, you haven't been able to work it out. I'm going to make the decision. See, if you make all the decisions, then their brains are dead. All they're going to do is try to figure out, okay, what do they want? I don't know what she wants. I'll just wait to find out what she wants. Why should we think of anything? She'll tell us what she wants. You know. So at some point, you got to let them make decisions, even if you disagree with it. There's a Japanese industrialist, Matsusuchi, who says, 60% of the decisions that are made, I don't think are really the best. But I let them be made anyway. How else do people learn? 40%, I'm not willing to take the risk. What percent are you willing to take the risk of it not being done exactly the way you want, even though everyone else wants it that way? But at some point you have to say, hey, I'm making the decision. And when you do that, when you do have to make the decision by authority, these are the two things you have to do. You have to make certain that others experience being understood, what I've been talking about. And you have to acknowledge the risk they already know that you're willing to take by not following their advice. All you got to do is say, I understand the risk is this. It's going to take more time. It's going to cost more money. It didn't work before, so it might not work now. Whatever it is, all you got to do is just acknowledge it. You do those two things as an authority. That is the most respectful way to be an authority. And use it when it's necessary, and use it when others don't agree with what you're doing. Acknowledge the risk. Make sure they experience being understood. Any questions about that? Easier said than done, but it's an insightful way of relieving a lot of the pressure I think authorities put on ourselves. all that I'm sharing with you is stuff that I use in my life all the time. I used to get sick all the time for about 10 years worrying about stuff before I knew these things. Now I'm a lot healthier than I was before. I worried a lot. I think it was a family trait. I don't know, any of you have a habit of worry and grew up with worry? Anyone been trained by a master worrier? You know? But I learned that not only that I could be healthier, I learned that I could flip that worry to its positive opposite, a goal, and learn how to take action towards it. I learned how to decrease my stress all throughout the day. These are things that are important. I used to think that being a leader was figuring it all out myself. But what I've learned is that I am helped if I'm more curious about what others think and expressing that. And actually, they like working with me more the more I do that. I used to resent the resistance that coworkers had to change, the change I knew was good. Now I see that as part of the process. Dealing with resistance is just part of how you make the change happen, but there's successful ways of doing that. I used to be concerned about my authority, but I've learned to balance that with collaboration, and now I'm much more comfortable with it, by having that mantle wherever I am. And I used to think that my lifestyle, making that change, would be sufficient to deal with my stress, and I've learned that's not true. That really one of the greatest blessings I've had is to learn how to recognize my stress quicker and move through it faster, to be able to stop it as it happens. That's speeding through stress. That's my next book. And I've learned that even my worst experiences can become my best opportunities. And that's what that book's about. And I'm really excited that I got a chance to share all this with you today. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Now, I just have a few minutes in case anybody has any questions, because I know lots of stuff. And I'll be around for a while during lunch if you have any questions. Also, I've got to go to Austin this evening, and so Stephen's going to be here for the reception this evening. I'm sorry I can't make that. And see if you have any questions with him too. Yes?
In the dual relationship, when you said to him, or you said to him, I've already ordered a thousand of them, what emotion did that invoke in you?
So the question is, back in that example where I asked for Stephen's opinion, I didn't get the energy that I was needing, didn't get the agreement. I assumed he wasn't interested. I went and took action on it. The question is, how did that feel when you found that out?
Oh, range of emotions. Probably one is resentment. Another is when it's repeated over and over again, it's like a sense of hopelessness. You know, what's the use? God, we got to go through this again. And anger and frustration. But because over time we've made agreements about how to deal with those things. And again, like, as Rob was saying, I used to have the expectation that we're only succeeding and working together when we don't run into any disagreements. We've learned to trust that we can give one another that feedback. Now I know when I can adjust and when I can go ahead and be firm and say, wait a minute, that doesn't work. I don't care if you went ahead, we need to talk about what you're going to do before you do it now.
Okay, now let's turn that around.
I mean, he got angry at me in the car last week about something, you know, that...
But let's turn that around.
Okay.
Has he made decisions that you didn't?
Has he made decisions that I didn't?
That you didn't like? And what emotions did it?
Oh, definitely that he didn't like, yes.
Yeah, I mean, you went ahead and did something, and how did he react to that?
I think we both have a similar reaction anytime to that. We interpreted initially as not being respected, not being valued. It's going to lead to hurt and anger, those kinds of things. But now we've learned that that's not what the real meaning is. I mean, isn't it true that the people you have difficulty with are going to be the way they are whether you're there or not? It's not personal. It's difficult at times. So, like when he was angry at me last week, that was difficult, but I'm breathing, I'm relaxing, I'm reassuring myself, and I'm trying to understand what it is that he's trying to say to me. And so we tolerate emotions in a way better than we did in the past, because it's not personal, and we know that that's important, and there's something not being understood, and how do we work through that? And the quicker we do it, the less times that happens.
Yeah, that's the thing that has worked for me is I realize when Rob does something that I disagree with or that I'm frustrated with, the frustration is coming from my judgment about why he's doing it. Now I realize as soon as I feel that frustration, no, I've learned from experience that the reason that he's doing it is some other reason completely. I need to find out what that is, because that's what's motivating his behavior, not whatever I'm thinking.
So he doesn't doubt that I value him and respect him and care
Yeah.
about him.
And that came from, he was describing that thing about trust. The trust doesn't end up because he always does what he says he's going to do, or he always does what I want him to do. The trust comes from, it's safe for me to tell him what I'm thinking, especially when we disagree with one another, and he's not going to hold that against me. That kind of safety allows all the stuff to come up to the surface, and then we can work it out. Good question.
Yes.
Relax completely. I'm always moving, shaking, jumping, legs going. And
About the relax completely?
I don't stop. Is that something that can be controlled?
Yes.
Just because there's no
Well, it's a habit that you have.
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, I think it can. I mean, maybe it'll require some massage and maybe require usually tensing before you relax. And there's some processes we go through, something called balanced relaxation, that would tend to lower that stillness.
Rob,
Now,
do we have that on the website?
yeah, we
A
do.
link?
We can send links to all of you. But relaxation is a double-edged sword, because when you become still, your mind becomes more active. So oftentimes what happens is your mind then goes to the worries more quickly. And so a lot of times we maintain activity in order to kind of keep that away. So when you do become still, whatever it is you've been avoiding worrying about is going to come into focus for you. And so that's a good thing to see, because now you know what it is I need to give attention to. If you've been warning with the idea that if I don't know how, then I can't deal with it, it's better not to know. But now perhaps you might be more open to looking at what are all the worries I'm having, because there's something there that I need to address. It's not going to go away. It tends to get worse over time. But you can learn to turn to address it and start to focus on the goals and get help when you need help. And there are ways to practice, in essence, learning how to become completely still, even for the purpose of discovering what I'm worrying about that I've not been giving time to.
We have on the website a link to a little audio that you can go through that'll take you through how to tense the muscles, breathe, and relax. And it's by doing that over time that you get to the point where you don't have to take 10, 15 minutes to do that. You can do it just very quickly and automatically get yourself to being still and calm.
So Dr. Rob Pennington takes you to my bio page. Resource-I is our website. Both of them have links to other things, and you can get contact with us there, and we'll try and make all this available. Yes.
On the flip side of becoming completely still, I find that if I take a walk, sometimes I have to get away from my desk and just walk. I can find the solution, I can visualize what's
Yes.
next.
Very good.
Do you have that
I agree.
experience?
Yes, and anything like that which breaks your normal activity and lets yourself float. I mean, haven't you ever noticed driving sometimes and then all of a sudden realize you don't remember the last 10 miles? It's a little scary to do that, but it's because you're now thinking more intensely. And so walking is something like that. You don't have to think about a lot of it, especially if you've got sidewalks that aren't requiring attention. And then your mind can be a little looser to be open to think about things, and ideas can come that you've been kind of sitting on the back burner. True. Anything else?
Well, I have to go back to that still, because I run just so I can.
Good. I would recommend after that, that's the time, best time to stop and pause and relax, is after the activity, after the exercise. And just sit and breathe and just practice that for a little while.
It has to be part of it, the relaxing.
I think the more you do each one of these on purpose and in an intensive way, then when you practice breathe, relax, reassure, you've got the muscle ready. You know. So the more you spend time being completely relaxed, the more powerful when you breathe and breathe out, you drop tension all the way through the body.
The trick to getting yourself to the point where you can choose to relax is, the difficulty is that right now you're habitually unconsciously tense. So
That's
to
everybody,
say,
by the way.
just go ahead and relax. Just, you can't, because it's unconscious. That's why you have to do the tension deliberately in order to deliberately undo it. That's why you get up and walk. You're doing something actively. That's why you run. But there is an exercise that you can do that helps you do that, connected to breathing, and then the breathing and the physical tension becomes an automatic trigger to tell your muscles to relax. And it's kind of like, you know, training the dog to sit. You're training your muscles to relax on purpose. You know, sit, relax.
Right, instantly. And on Stephen's bio, StephenHaslam.com, there's a link, I think, to the balance relaxation from there. Anything else? Again, thank you all very much. We appreciate it. And what's that for? Oh, the drawing. Oh, the drawing.
Now, what's this one for?
This is for the book.
The book.
Trent? Okay, good, Trent. Let me make sure we sign it. This is for the free coaching session.
Make sure he signs it for you. It's not signed yet.
Kathy Standish. Good, Kathy. And this is for a free presentation, you know, at work or another association, whatever you want. Karen Cambio. Okay, Karen. Good. Thank you all very much.